let me talk about some of the media names which are doing fairly well in today's trading session. But before we do that, let's get to our market guest, Andrew Holland. Let's chat with him about what is going on in the markets. Hi Andrew, thanks a lot for taking time out and speaking to us. We're seeing a very strong rally in the pharma names. Now this is of course second, third day on the trot. Do you believe that the worst for pharma is behind us, and is our investors once again ready to come back to the sector and are looking at some kind of growth in the near to medium term?
Yeah, I think we're just going through that phase of optimism about the pharma sector. Started off by Sun Pharma really, and getting some clearances for their manufacturing plant. But we saw this previously, in sectors which eventually succumb to the kind of competitive pressures. So we had it through telecom, we had it in IT, and we're just starting with pharma. So I expect we're going to have these upward kind of days or weeks, when things are looking okay. But I think the competitive pressures for a lot of the generic pharma companies is not going away from them, and it's going to get even worse as the year goes on. So the actual change that we're expecting now is going to be quite painful, because you have to change your kind of the whole way of your strategy. Those days of generic profits and what we saw is gone. It's not coming back. So they will have to change their business model, and that will take time. But you will have these days when you're all optimistic. Every pharma company gets put under the same lens, and the positives come out. But I'm afraid that fundamentally there's nothing really changed.
Hi Andrew, this is Nayantara joining in from the New Delhi studio. I just want to carry on with this before we talk a little bit about sectors, etc. In the month of May, we saw the highest outflow of FIIs, most that they've sold in 18 months. Do you think that trend is going to continue? You've seen the recovery in the US, you had that rate hike maybe in the US, but now India has responded to the governor of the RBI has responded with a rate hike.
So I think we will, because I don't think that's the end of the increase in interest rates for India. And I think we have a number of events now. Obviously, political risk will be high on the agenda for all of us over the next 1 year, and that will keep markets volatile at best. I think the other concerns, obviously, is that what's happening in other emerging markets such as Brazil and Argentina and South Africa, which has a catalyst effect in India in terms of the thinking around the rupee, and that has obviously kind of scared investors away. But where valuations are at the moment for the Indian markets, there's no big catalyst unless you continue to have global markets continue to move higher. And we've seen that in the performance over the last 2 to 3 months, where we've underperformed most markets, we've had the worst performing currency. And that's what has moved FIIs away. So I don't think they're coming back in a hurry, that's for sure. And if anything, we'll probably continue to see outflows, not just from equities, but certainly from bonds, where the weakness of the rupee and the hardening bond yield is really going to have investors take the money off the table.
Since you mentioned about bond yield, and of course there's a fear of dollar strengthening further, there are a lot of global events, very big events happening across the world, especially Kim and Trump meet, which everybody is going to have a very close watch on. There was this G7 summit which did not really go down well with the investors. There's also the Fed meet, and a rate hike is expected by most people on the street. So are things likely to get further difficult for Indian equity markets in terms of attracting foreign investors?
Yeah, I think so, because let's take it in terms of the Fed rate increase. I think everyone's going for 25 basis points increase, but what if it was higher? I mean, the jobs data in the US and the economic growth, suggests that they could actually go a little higher if they need to, because inflation's picking up there too. So I wouldn't be surprised if you might see that, but the markets aren't expecting that at all. And again, I think we've all kind of forgotten what short-term interest rates can do to people's spending and the economy, and we're a bit complacent about that. And I think this is partly to do with the bond yields in the US being partly a safe haven against emerging markets. We saw that with Italy a few weeks ago, and then they to gradually creep up again. So I think the global scenario is a little bit murky at the moment in terms of that. On the one side, global equity markets are doing well, but your kind of credit markets and debt markets are a lot more volatile along with currencies. So I think it's been currencies, bonds, and it'll be equities next. And so maybe what we saw in February and March globally as well for India might rear its ugly head in the next few months as well.
Andrew, we're talking now at the end of the fourth quarter earnings. What did you make of the earnings season? Clearly, the consumer sector seems to have done well and has been the favorite of the markets as well and been rewarded for the kind of earnings it's provided. So, if you were to take a cue from the earnings season and juxtapose it with all the macros you're talking about, what is it that you're betting on, long or short?
Well, the macro in India looks pretty poor at the moment. Fortunately, the micro looks better. So we've been expecting earnings growth for this year, 18-19 of around 15% growth, and I think markets are finally coming down towards that figure. We're quite comfortable with that, but it is going to be certain sectors such as FMCG, IT, selective autos, which are going to deliver this growth, and then you're going to have your big laggards such as the PSU banks, oil and marketing companies, which are going to drag the earnings going forward. So, but overall, we think the sectors that we've been investing in, which is boringly the same with private banks, FMCG, IT, autos, and a little bit now we're starting to pick up on the CapEx theme. It's still very early days, but I think it's something worth looking at a little bit harder at the moment, so that's what we are doing.
So Holland, thanks much for joining us with your perspective on the markets. It's great chatting with you, but we'll have to let you go since we have a bit of a time constraint. Thanks much for coming on board. Let's move right on and go across to Pankaj. Pankaj, it's an important day for Fortis. They're going to